AD Mitchell, Braelon Allen, and Marshawn Lloyd are three of the biggest losers coming out of the 2024 NFL Draft. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Magdziuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. On today's show, we are discussing the biggest rookie losers coming out of the draft. On yesterday's show, we talked about the biggest winners, so go check out that one. That one had really, really good reviews. We had some interesting running backs that you and I thought maybe gained some value. But today we're going to be negative Nancy's. Let's talk about AD Mitchell, who I got to say, you and I were not particularly high on coming into the draft. I feel even less confident about his chances of being successful in the NFL. What do you think?
That's the thing, Marcus. I want to just talk in general about this very deep class and even a running back position. There was a lot of depth in this class, and you could see the upside in maybe not the most complete prospects as you get into rounds 2, 3, 4. But I will say, in terms of landing spots in rounds 2, 3, 4, we kind of got a mess. We got an absolute mess because we look at AD Mitchell, who now, I think had kind of this mixed bag of an analytical profile, not a great yards after the catch guy, but a supreme athlete, has this elite combination of size, speed, and athleticism that, you knew was a trait that maybe won't necessarily translate to the NFL immediately, but in the right situation could. Now he's playing behind Michael Pittman, who was just extended. You have Josh Downs there in the slot. You have, I think a lot of other options there. Alec Pierce, who, again, kind of one of these deep threat options down the seam. I think there's a lot of bodies here in the Colts offense right now. And I'm just wondering, what is AD Mitchell's place in this offense? And,
not to mention, Kate, this is also a team that I think wants to run the football. I mean, I don't know if they want to be as skewed, as run heavy as they were a couple years ago, but I think
they don't want to be the Pittsburgh Steelers, but
no,
they want to run the ball.
Yeah, they want to run the ball, right? I think they want to stay balanced, and they should. They've got one of the best running backs in the league in Jonathon Taylor. They've got one of the best offensive lines in the league. And
they have a good rushing quarterback as well.
And that's the other thing. They've got a quarterback who is very good at running with the football. Before the draft, we were kind of going through some of our comps. And actually, one of the comps that I gave for AD Mitchell was Michael Pittman. This bigger-bodied receiver who runs routes really well, but doesn't offer you a lot after the catch. Now, I know Mitchell tested as a better athlete, but that's kind of the play style, right? So in that spot, he landed on a team that at least knows how to use that type of receiver. However, how effective is he going to be in Dynasty if he's being blocked by Michael Pittman, who the Colts absolutely love, and for good reason?
Yeah, and I don't think you can ever have too many Michael Pittmans on your team, right? You want that big player. I don't think AD Mitchell is a guy that plays maybe as big as he could at the next level. We'll see how he kind of develops his game. But I mean, when you have a refined Michael Pittman and an unrefined Michael Pittman and AD Mitchell, I think that's going to lend itself to a lot more production for Michael Pittman 1A. So I think there's some overlap in the skill sets, and I just don't understand necessarily where he's going to fit in terms of the personnel usage and how often is he going to see the field? Question marks. And again, that's not to say that, AD Mitchell isn't a guy that has a lot of traits that you would like for the wide receiver position. The yards after the catch one is a tough one to get over, but like it's not necessarily going to be the pinnacle of his game anyway. But where does he fit in? It's really hard to say.
It is. And the other thing that, I mean, you and I love Anthony Richardson. We're big fans of him coming into the draft. We're big fans of him in Dynasty. I'm not sure. I mean, we've only seen him play, was it 4 games? I'm not sure even if he hits his ceiling, is going to be the type of quarterback that can support multiple fantasy receivers, because I think a lot of his work, I think he's going to be very valuable in the red zone scoring touchdowns. So if your receivers are capped on their touchdown potential and this is a balanced offense, how many targets is your number 2 receiver getting? I know maybe this is short-sighted and maybe the Colts will move on from Michael Pittman down the road. I don't see it. I think this is a really bad landing spot. And for somebody who we were hoping would maybe land in the spot where he could get 120 targets right away, it's hard to envision him being a factor in our fantasy leagues anytime soon.
And I also think the quality of target is something that matters, right? Like we saw Anthony Richardson immediately take the field and he was a quarterback 1. He was a quarterback 1, I think, in both of the games that he started and finished, in big part thanks to his rushing upside. And I think because of that rushing upside, there has been kind of a neglect of, some of the inconsistencies, the wild inconsistencies that we saw from Anthony Richardson in that very small sample size of his work as a passer. He still has a lot of work to do as a passer. So like the quality of targets, I'm not going to compare, targets, in say his targets are worth as much as a more refined quarterback, even like a JJ McCarthy at this point. I would trust maybe some of the more value and consistency in those type of targets.
Sure.
Rocket arm, high upside for days. Like anybody that's on the field with this guy is going to have, weekly upside as a wide receiver too, just sheer based on potential to catch bombs, right? But
Yes, I agree.
the consistency factor is almost off the board entirely with AD Mitchell. It was already a concern for him coming out.
So just to be clear, we both like Ladd McConkey and Keon Coleman better in Dynasty right now than AD Mitchell.
Reluctantly. Ladd McConkey by like a giant margin.
I like Keon Coleman significantly more than AD Mitchell, which was not my take coming into the draft. That's why the landing spot matters so much. All right, let's move on to a running back that we had really high hopes for just a couple years ago. Instead, he goes at the bottom of the 4th round to a team that is already loaded with running backs. Let's talk about Braelon Allen next. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause for a second to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. You guys have already talked about that before, but there's just so much good stuff going on in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more that you win together, the more awesome prizes that you unlock. And there's so much to get, like unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and these hilarious emojis for taunting friends. It's absolutely fantastic. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or these really cool machines. There's also new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun going on in Monopoly Go. So go off the bench and download it now for free on the Google Play or App Store. Game on. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that unnecessary shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Kate, let's talk about Braelon Allen, who lands with the Jets in the 4th round. Not ideal.
Not ideal at all, Marcus. I was very, very excited to see where Braelon Allen could end up. And we talked about kind of that dip in production in his final season at Wisconsin, despite the fact like still 3 years of productivity coming out of a Big Ten school. Led his team in rushing and took on this true 3 down role with the Badgers. I think like out of the gate, like as a true freshman, kind of dominated that offense. And you saw at that point him skyrocket to, like RB1 in devy leagues. Well, guess what? Now he gets to rot on the depth chart that is the New York Jets roster, because not only is he blocked by Breece Hall, who has another 2 years left on his contract, barring any extension, even. He's also like, again, kind of Izzy. Can you help me say his name?
Abaconda.
Izzy Abuconda, who the team seems to really like and, is probably going to earn a role maybe based on special teams. Um, Isaiah Davis, also drafted by the
Yeah.
New York Jets, who are just hoarding running backs at this point.
Ridiculous.
What are they doing? I don't know, but I don't see a pathway where, Braelon Allen, a guy who I thought had true 3 down potential, is ever going to see a 3 down role, barring a trade.
And the Jets aren't trading Breece Hall. This one reminds me a lot of like when Zach Charbonnet went to the Seahawks last year. Just the draft capital was so
Just
much better
greedy.
for his. Yeah, I know. So here's the thing with Braelon, right? It's like I think this Jets window is like a year or 2 years at most, and that takes us through Breece Hall's rookie contract. After that, let's say after the 2025 season, because Aaron Rodgers won't be there anymore, and it's probably clear that Robert Saleh and everybody else will be gone. This team's going to look totally different, and I think it's going to be torn down to the bones. And I'm not sure you're going to want a running back on the Jets, anyways, at that point. And Breece Hall is so young that I would be shocked if they didn't give him a second contract. So what you're hoping for here, and this is terrible, is you're hoping for an injury, and that's just nowhere to be with a dynasty running back. It's not even like he has amazing draft capital. Like if he was a early third round pick, the way that Blake Corum was, I can at least kind of talk myself into that. Hey, they spent a top 100 pick. Let's see what the role is going to be like. When you're spending a pick in the 120s on a running back, to me, that signals like we just wanted to add some depth, and we don't have any long-term goals of this guy being a starter.
Man, imagine if Braelon Allen would have gone to, I don't know, the Cowboys. Like that would have
We have
been,
Zeke. What are you talking about, Kate?
yeah, no need for a running back in this draft class. I just think there were a million different spots where Braelon Allen could have been an impact player. And yes, he was not perfect as a prospect, but he himself just turned 20 years old. Like, so not just are the Jets hoarding running backs, they're hoarding really young running backs. So, by the time we have fully played out his contract, he's only going to be 25, probably not going to have that many miles on the tires, but he's probably also going to be sitting on your dynasty waiver wire if things don't play out in a more favorable direction. Now, to be clear, this is a guy that I'm probably going to be stashing on a lot of my rosters and
I'm the
just
same way. It's just
drop
you're
him
going to
on
be
the
able to give cheap.
taxi squad.
You're going to be able to get him so cheap right now. And I will say, I think something's going to happen with this Jets depth chart at running back. They're just not going to be able to keep all these running backs. Somebody's going to get moved, and it's probably going to be Izzy. But even then, I don't know if that gets me all that excited. It's just a really unfortunate situation for Braelon Allen to end up with the Jets. Maybe best case scenario, if we're being super optimistic, maybe he ends up becoming the goal line running back, and you can get some. I mean, Jamal Williams with the Lions is a little bit too high of praise because he's not going to get that much work. But maybe he is somebody who can score you 8 to 9 touchdowns a season, can rack up 800-ish yards as a change of pace guy. But even then, we're talking about somebody who we had hoped at one time would be like a top 10 dynasty running back to somebody who's pretty clearly outside the top 30, 35 guys right now.
Yeah, it's kind of brutal. I will say the one thing that kind of works in his favor a little bit, if they become this ground and pound offense, like I do think that Braelon Allen's skill set kind of complements that of Breece Hall pretty well.
Yes.
They have very different type of running backs. Breece Hall obviously has that top end athleticism. Braelon Allen, not necessarily the best athlete, more of like that sort of power type running back build. I do think there could be room if they just make this a run first offense, but when you're in this short window with Aaron Rodgers, you have Garrett Wilson. I just don't see it playing out that way. But again, I don't think it's for a lack of talent. So
It's
fly,
it's
that's
it's
fly.
depressing. The thing is, we're going to talk about two other running backs in this class, Jonathon Brooks and Marshawn Lloyd, who I think both lost value over the weekend. They're not the only ones. Like, this was a brutal draft class for the running back landing spots. I mean, we mentioned Blake Corum. Like, I thought Blake Corum could potentially end up with like the Chargers as the lead running back. Nope, he's blocked behind Kyron Williams. Who did you happen to watch the press conference between Sean McVay and Les Snead talk
I
about Blake
didn't.
Corum?
Please
It
tell
was
me.
amazing. They basically said they drafted Blake Corum because they love Kyron Williams so much, and Corum is the running back that reminds them the most of Kyron Williams, which is like, it's awesome. Like, it's a compliment to Blake Corum, but it's also like telling us that Kyron Williams is never coming off the field, right? And if he does, they wanted to get a guy that was similar. This entire running back class, outside of maybe Trey Benson, I think took a huge hit this weekend.
Yeah, it's again brutal fits. You have a lot of redundancy in terms of the skill sets that players drafted. Jalen Wright, you have who like
Oh,
arguably one of the best landing spots that he could have probably played in, but like he's competing for touches with Devin A. Chain, a very similarly very fast, speedy breakaway runner. Like what I think we need a redo. I'm
I know.
calling
Well,
a redo.
the
Stop the
the
count.
the other thing that was frustrating is like the three teams that I thought could take a running back and immediately have them play right away were the Cowboys, the Chargers, and the Raiders. And none of those three teams took a running back early in this draft at all. The Raiders, their first running back was Dylan Lobby from New Hampshire in round 6.
Excellent
Cowboys,
receiving back, but
yeah,
not
great.
gonna be your RB1.
And the Cowboys didn't draft a running back. So it's frustrating. The teams that we thought absolutely could have fed a running back 200, 300 touches in a season just basically ignored that position. But I want to get into a little bit of a debate. I want to talk about who you think lost more value this weekend between Jonathon Brooks, who went to the Panthers, and Marshawn Lloyd, who went to the Packers. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and in the NHL. Although my Lakers are out of the playoffs now, so what does it really even matter? But baseball season is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. I'm telling you right now, I am betting on the Timberwolves the rest of the way. I love Anthony Edwards. I don't even care if it's a smart bet or not. I want to root for Anthony Edwards and the Timberwolves. So what are you waiting for? I want to know what you guys are betting on when it comes to the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are breaking down the biggest rookie losers from the NFL draft. And Kate, let's have a little debate here. Marshawn Lloyd versus Jonathon Brooks. Who do you believe lost more value this weekend?
It's gotta be Marshawn Lloyd going to the Green Bay Packers, who I liked Marshawn Lloyd a lot. And I've said a lot that the skill set of these running backs, there's nobody really, maybe besides Jonathon Brooks, who had like a true well-rounded, perfect skill set. But Marshawn Lloyd was a guy that I was looking at as somebody with potential 3-down capability, maybe not the most refined, runner in general, but like I thought there was something there. He's a little bit on the small side, he's a little bit on the older side, but I didn't expect him to go to a situation where he was going to be competing with Josh Jacobs for touches. Now, like again,
And AJ
small
Dillon.
Yeah, like, and AJ Dillon, honestly, kind of an afterthought at this point. But like, you look at the investment that this team just made in Josh Jacobs, and I'm wondering, for a guy that, again, despite some of the size concerns overall, I thought the tape was really clean. Um, averaged 7.1 yards per carry in his only season at USC. Like, I really liked Marshawn Lloyd. I thought he was, solidly productive as a receiver. Like, I thought he could just do a little bit of everything. Ran a 4.46 40-yard dash. Like, I just liked the player. And then he comes out and he's going to be competing with this guy that they just gave a monster contract to. And I know it's not a monster contract in the setting of, I don't know, Amon-Ra St. Brown money, but I also think when it comes to the running back position, really any sort of like
Yep.
contract beyond your rookie year ends up being a monster deal. I don't really see any sort of pathway to him having a meaningful role in this offense.
The argument for me would be that he's on a good offense, right? And that's just going to give him a lot more opportunities to score fantasy points, score touchdowns, catch the ball out of the backfield. For me, for Jonathon Brooks, this is as bad as it gets for a couple different reasons. Number one, they signed Miles Sanders last year, who didn't play hardly at all last year. So that one doesn't concern me a lot. He's still on the roster. But
Yeah, you know why he didn't play? Because he ain't good, Marcus.
Yeah. Now, Chuba Hubbard did play, and I thought Chuba Hubbard played pretty well last season. The concern for me with Jonathon Brooks is that now you are on a team where I really have concerns about the entire offense. You've got a lot of new pieces, new receivers, new offensive line, new play caller, second-year quarterback who's 5'6". Like, I just have a lot of concerns that this offense is going to be very mediocre again this year. And we've got a running back coming off a torn ACL. They might feel like, let's slow play this a little bit. We want him to be healthy for the remainder of his career. Let's make sure we ease him into that. That's always a concern. I want my running backs to produce right away. The other reason why I'm saying he is the biggest loser is, remember how we were talking about Jonathon Brooks? Like 2 weeks ago, right? We were saying if Jonathon Brooks landed with a team like the Cowboys, he could potentially be a top 5 dynasty running back. He ain't going to be anywhere close to that now. Like, I'm looking at some of the running back rankings now, and it's like,
well, let's do the exercise then. If because I agree, he's not a top 10 dynasty running back, but I'm going to be honest, I think there's a bit of a dead zone. So like, let's start somewhere around RB12 range. Let's start with RB13 in the latest batch of Dynasty ADP. Again, this is pre-draft, so things will change. Isaiah Pacheco. James Cook.
So they only drafted Ray Davis, which I like Ray Davis, but I'll go James Cook there.
I will also go James Cook. DeAndre Swift, new Chicago Bear.
I'll take Jonathon Brooks there.
Okay. Derrick Henry.
Get out of here. I'll take
800 years old.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
That's the cutoff for me. Like, so we're talking about RB 15-ish. But
okay, so he dropped, like, let's say 5 to 7 spots in your dynasty rankings. Whereas,
however, though, we got to remember there's going to be running backs behind him. For example, I like Trey Benson so much more now than I like Jonathon Brooks, and Trey Benson was being drafted after that, right? I think somebody like Zamir White, who didn't add any competition really in the draft, I'm not saying I would take him straight up over Jonathon Brooks, but he's at least in that conversation. So I think RB 16-ish is where we're at right now.
I think that's fair, and I'm glad you brought up Trey Benson. I actually traded for him. I'm in the middle of a rookie draft right now. He was sitting there at the 204. And
what
I
a
said to
steal.
myself, what is happening here?
What a steal.
So I'm gonna tell you what I get. You can grade the trade. I just want to hear your grade here. I sent Rachaad White in the 304 for Trey Benson.
I mean, that's a steal.
Thank you.
You do that deal all day long. What are we doing?
Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to toot my own horn there, but I think all of those things are fine. Now, my counterpoint to that, and the reason I don't necessarily agree that he's like the biggest loser, I still think he holds a lot of dynasty value. I still think from a talent perspective of where he's at outside of the ACL, he's the best running back in this class. I think the overall vision, I think the footwork, the wiggle, like all of that is plus in his corner. But I think what is going to be most valuable to him at the next level is going to be A, his ability in pass protection, and B, his ability as a receiver. Because not only is he going to be, I think, a huge asset to Bryce Young in both of those regards year one, but like, especially in regards to an offense that needs to do a better job at protecting the quarterback. They made some investments in the offensive line. They're doing their best. Okay. And I do think for a guy who was sacked to oblivion in 2023, they're going to want to do some schematic things and get the ball to the running backs, quick dump off passes. We saw, despite, a largely inefficient season from Rachaad White, who is under new Panthers head coach, David Canales, like we saw him have an incredibly productive season. He was a focal point of that passing attack. I wouldn't be surprised if Brooks can bring that same kind of skill set, if not way better, because Jonathon Brooks is a much better running back and a much better pure runner. I'm just saying, I don't think all hope is lost, and I don't necessarily think we can write the story of the Panthers offense just yet.
I just hate this running back class so much, Kate. It's not fun.
It's so, my blood pressure is so high thinking of what could have been versus what is.
I know. It's depressing.
It is depressing, but you know what? Like, I do think that, I don't know. I think there are some gems in this class. Unfortunately, they didn't all land in the right spots the first time around, but we know that the NFL does not close its books at the draft. There's plenty of movement that we could still see in the time to come. Like, their stories aren't over. But these guys definitely lost some value. Did I sell you at all on Jonathon Brooks?
A little bit. You convinced me, like, maybe to move him up one spot. That's all. I just, for somebody who I had hopes of potentially being a top 5 dynasty running back, to have him down in the mid-teens is,
it's a sucker punch to the gut.
It is.
I get it.
It really, really is. You know what's not a sucker punch to the gut? Having Matt Williamson on the show tomorrow, because it's a Wednesday show. So make sure you guys are on the lookout for that. Make sure you're downloading the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. That was a terrible segue. I know. It's okay. It's not a big deal. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow with Matt Williamson.